Let me ask you something. Have you ever checked if you locked the front door and then checked again and then a third time, even though you watched yourself turn the key? Or read a message you already read twice because something about it didn't feel finished? Or had a thought arrive in your head that you didn't want? Something dark, something strange, something that made you think, where did that even come from? Most people have had at least one of those moments. Most people brush it off, move on, forget it by the next day. But some people can't move on. For some people, that thought, that one uninvited thought, becomes a permanent resident. It doesn't leave when you want it to. It doesn't quiet down when you argue with it. It just stays. And the harder you try to push it out, the louder it gets. Tonight I want to tell you about a 16-year-old girl named Anamalli who discovered the hardest possible way what happens when a mind gets stuck in a loop it cannot exit.
The Unnormal Files, Episode 3. She was fully conscious. She still couldn't stop.
It is 2:13 in the morning. A woman is standing in a dark hallway outside a closed bathroom door. She is not knocking. She is not calling out. She is just standing there, listening. Inside, her daughter is scrubbing her hands. Not washing them, scrubbing them. The way you'd scrub something you desperately needed to get clean. Except her hands were already clean. They had been clean for the last 40 minutes. Her skin had turned red. Her lips were moving, trembling, barely audible. Her eyes fixed on the mirror, staring at something only she could see. And she was whispering the same 6 words, over and over, like they were the only thing standing between her and something catastrophic. God is good. God is good. God is good. Then she stopped. Her face changed. A thought had entered her mind, one she didn't want. And now everything had to begin again. This was the 9th time tonight. Her mother had stopped counting. Now, here is the thing I need you to understand before we go any further. Anamalli was not losing her mind. She knew the washing wasn't necessary. She knew the counting wasn't protecting anyone. She knew clearly, rationally, completely that none of it was working. And she did it anyway, because stopping felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and stepping off. So who was this girl? And how did she end up here? To understand that, you need to go back 6 months, to the city that changed everything. Anamalli grew up in Unnormal, a small town where she was known as the quiet one, sensitive, the kind of person who picks up on a shift in someone's mood before a single word is spoken, who feels a room change before anyone else notices. In a small town, that quality is a gift. In a new city, alone, overwhelmed, far from everything familiar, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a receiver that never switches off. 6 months after the move, something began shifting in how her mind worked. It started with a sentence, one sentence, repeating in her head. Not a memory, not a worry, just a loop that wouldn't close. She'd repeat it 3 times, hoping it would feel finished. It didn't feel finished. So she'd try 6, then 12. The number kept moving, because whatever she was chasing, she could never quite catch it. And then the thoughts changed. They became thoughts about God. And I don't mean spiritual doubts. I mean something that felt, to Anamalli, like a violation, an intrusion, a thought she would never choose to have, arriving anyway, without invitation. The moment it appeared, her chest tightened, her heart raced, her whole body responded as if a real physical danger had just walked into the room. Because in her mind, a verdict had already been reached. God would punish her, not someday, right now. Her height would stop growing. Something terrible would happen to someone she loved. unless she fixed it immediately. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, that sounds like something you just talk yourself out of. Sounds like a superstition. Sounds manageable. I thought that too. Until I understood what the rituals were actually doing to her brain. Because the rituals weren't the problem, they were the trap. And once you're inside this trap, almost no one finds the exit on their own. Here is something nobody tells you about rituals. The first time, they actually work. The first time Anamalli washed her hands after an intrusive thought, the anxiety dropped. The thought quieted. Her body exhaled. So the next time a thought arrived, she washed her hands again. Why wouldn't she? It worked. And this, right here, is the trap. So perfectly designed that almost no one sees it until they're already deep inside it. Every time you perform a ritual to escape a thought, you teach your brain exactly one thing. The thought was dangerous and the ritual saved you. The brain files this as fact, evidence, proof, and the next time a thought arrives, the brain demands the ritual faster, with more urgency, with more certainty that skipping it would be catastrophic. And the rituals expand, washing hands 10 times, then 15, then until the number felt right. Except the number never felt right, so the number kept changing. Touching a doorknob and releasing it, and touching it again, because something still felt incomplete, wrong, unfinished. And the only way to check was to check again and again. Whispering corrections whenever a bad thought arrived. A frantic, desperate repair of damage only she could see. And sometimes, when the thoughts came faster than the rituals could keep up, something inside her broke open. Screaming, tearing papers, throwing things across the room. Not anger at anyone in the room, a war against something living entirely inside her own head, with no weapons left that worked. Then came 7 days where she barely ate. Not a hunger strike, not sadness in the way most people understand it. Her mind was simply running so loudly, so constantly, that it had crowded out everything else. Even hunger, even the most basic signal a body sends to keep itself alive. The apartment changed after that. Every sound carried different weight. A door opening became a question. Footsteps at midnight became a check. A tap at 2 a.m. became the sound that pulled her mother out of a sleep she was barely in. And here is the thing about watching someone fight an enemy that lives entirely inside them. You cannot point to it. You cannot reason with it on their behalf. You cannot stand between them and it. All you can do is stand outside the door and listen to the tap running again and again and again. But here's what I haven't told you yet. The whole time this was happening, Anamalli knew. She knew it made no sense. She could see the loop. She could describe it perfectly. And she still couldn't get out. That is the part that will stay with you.
What was happening to Anamalli has a name.
OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. And I need to stop here because I know what that word just did to some of you. Some of you heard OCD and thought, oh, that's the neat freak thing. The thing people joke about. The thing someone says when they prefer a clean desk. Throw that away completely. Because what Anamalli had, what real OCD looks like in a real person's life, has nothing to do with neatness. OCD is what happens when your brain gets locked in a loop it cannot exit on its own. The brain produces a thought, intrusive, unwanted, the kind you'd never choose. It labels the thought dangerous. It demands a ritual to neutralize the danger. The ritual works, briefly, just barely. The brain takes that as proof the ritual is necessary. And the next time the thought arises, it comes faster, louder, more certain that disaster is coming. Loop. No natural exit. No off switch. In Anamalli's case, the obsessions were religious. A specific form called scrupulosity. The brain taking the thing she held most sacred, her faith, her relationship with God, her deep need to be good, and weaponizing it against her. Think about what that actually means. The thing that is supposed to give you comfort, the thing that has always meant safety and meaning, is now the source of your greatest terror. God stopped feeling like shelter. God had become the thing she was most afraid of. And here is the cruelest detail of all. She knew. She knew it made no logical sense. She knew a passing thought couldn't physically stop her from growing. She could see the absurdity of it, clearly, painfully clearly. OCD doesn't take that knowledge away. It just makes the knowing completely useless. You can see the trap. You can describe it to someone else in perfect detail. You still cannot get out. And that is why no one in Anamalli's life, not her relatives, not her neighbors, not well-meaning people with good advice, could help her by simply saying, just stop, just think positive, just trust God. She was trying, harder than anyone around her could see. The person who came closest to understanding, without ever having the name for it, was a woman who had been sitting on a cold floor outside a bathroom door night after night for months. Waiting, listening, not leaving. Picture this. Every night, for months, Anamalli's mother woke up in the middle of the night. Not from noise, from silence. Because silence at 3 a.m. in a home where this was happening had become more alarming than any sound. She'd walk to the bathroom, check the light under the door, listen for the tap, then sit down on the floor outside. Not to fix anything, not because she had answers, just to be there. To make sure her daughter knew, even through a closed door, that she wasn't alone in this. She once described the change in Anamalli using 7 words that should sound ordinary. They don't. Before, it was little. Here, it became more. I've thought about that sentence more than almost anything else in this case. Before, it was little. She had already noticed. Back in Endralullam, before the city, before the move, she had seen something in her daughter that was different, that required more care. She didn't have a name for it, but she saw it, and she stayed anyway. Here, it became more. And when it became more, when the rituals expanded and the nights got longer and the explanations ran out, she was still there, on the floor, outside the door, not going back to sleep, not deciding this was more than she could carry. There is something I have to be honest with you about now. The mental health system failed this family for a long time. No one gave them the name. No one explained that sitting outside the door and offering reassurance, as loving as that was clinically making the loop stronger. That every time the mother said, "It's okay, you're fine," the brain heard, the ritual worked, the threat was real. Do it again next time. No one told Anamalli that the ritual felt like safety, but was feeding the very thing she feared. They were both doing everything they could, and without the right information, everything you can do sometimes isn't enough. But here's what I want you to think about before we reach the end of this story. Because this is the part that's actually about you. How many people do you know, right now, today, who are carrying something like this? Not necessarily OCD, but something. A thought that arrives and won't leave. A small ritual that has quietly gotten longer over the past few months. Checking the gas, rereading a message, going back to a door you already know is locked. A thought they've never said out loud, because saying it out loud would make it real, or make them look unstable, or confirm whatever they already fear about themselves. OCD affects 2 to 3% of people globally. In India, that is tens of millions of people. Most of them undiagnosed. Most of them convinced the thoughts they are having are evidence of who they really are. Not a brain condition, a character flaw. And that shame, that specific private shame, is exactly what keeps OCD alive. Because OCD produces precisely the thoughts a person is most terrified to admit. Thoughts about God, about harming people they love, about contamination, about catastrophe, about being fundamentally, secretly bad. And as long as those thoughts stay secret, unnamed, unspoken, carried alone, the loop keeps running. The moment someone says it out loud, even to one person, the loop gets interrupted. Not ended overnight, not fixed with one conversation, but interrupted. An interruption is where everything begins. Anamalli eventually got that interruption. But the way it happened and what it cost to get there is the part of the story I want to leave you with. Anamalli got help, not because it was easy to ask for, not because the words came without cost, but because her mother sat on that floor for enough nights, patient, present, not leaving, that eventually they found someone who had the name. Someone who could say, "This is not a character flaw. This is not punishment from God. This is a condition. It has a name and it can be treated." The treatment for anyone listening who needs to hear this is called ERP, Exposure and Response Prevention. It doesn't ask you to stop having the thoughts. It asks you to have the thought and not perform the ritual. To sit with the discomfort, to let the anxiety rise and for once not run from it. And here is the thing nobody tells you before you try it. When you stop running from the thought loses its power. Not immediately, not painlessly, but gradually. The brain learns what it should have known all along. The thought was never the danger, the running was. We opened this episode with a question. Have you ever had a thought you've never told anyone? One that arrived uninvited and made you feel like something was wrong with you for having it? If the answer is yes, you are not broken. You are not dangerous. You are not the thought. The thought is not the truth. If something in this story felt personal and if this reached you, share it with one person. Not because of the channel, because somewhere out there, someone is standing outside a bathroom door at 2 a.m. and they don't have a word for what's happening inside. Maybe now, because of this, you do.
The Unnormal Files releases every week. Real cases, real minds, real questions about what it means to be human under pressure. Subscribe because someone close to you may be carrying something they haven't found the words for yet.